I get this question over and over and over again, so today I finally decided to address it. What is the best engine drive welder for your mobile welding service? Well, I've had a lot of welders in the past, and it really depends on what you're doing. The reason I have this Trailblazer is because it has this 14-pin connector. And with this 14-pin connector, I can hook a remote up, which means I can hook a spool gun up, a TIG pedal, and all sorts of other accessories. Arc reach, well, the first version of arc reach on this machine. And generally, this version of the Trailblazer is a very good running machine. I've never really had any real issues. The only real issue I had was I didn't have this little cap. I kept getting water in here, and it was making my board go crazy. So I think the Trailblazer is a really great machine. I think Miller makes a really great product. I do have a Lincoln welder. You've seen it on my big black truck. It's a Lincoln SAE 350. It's got a Deutz diesel in it. It's a super dependable machine, barely uses any fuel. I can run that thing on a tank of fuel for days on end. So it has its own advantages. It also has a very, very steady arc, and it's great for welding steel. Now, the Trailblazer is more versatile in that it has that remote plug-in, but the arc is not as steady, and I think it's because it's a board machine. I forget what they call that, an inverter machine. Now, my other machine is not an inverter machine. It has a rheostat and all that nonsense with it. So it just seems like it's a steadier arc. John over at MagniGas, well, what used to be MagniGas, explained it to me once upon a time why the arc is steadier on the Lincoln with no board in it and why it's not as steady on the Miller. Now, if you're just starting out, the Trailblazer might be a little pricey for you. You know, I paid about $3,500 back before this big bubble happened, and I mean, that was a fucking steal. Even right now, I could probably still get $4-5 grand for this machine. And my Lincoln, I only paid $2,500 for. Again, it was another deal that I'd found. I'm constantly looking for engine drive welders. I never stop looking for engine drive welders, and there's another tip for you. If you have some spare money, it doesn't hurt to have 2 or 3 extra engine drive welders sitting around, as long as you start them every once in a while and keep up on their maintenance. Now, maybe you don't have the money for that. And maybe you want to get something a little smaller, a little more light duty. You might have to move it around more. Well, you guys seen that I also bought that Miller, I can't remember the name of that one. But anyway, here's a picture of it. I bought that, I think, for $500. So, I mean, the deals are out there for these used engine drive welders. And if you have any mechanical knowledge, it's really not that big of a deal to buy a used welder. I personally will buy a used welder and engine drive and take it straight to John. I let John go through it. He checks everything out, make sure there's no major leaks, make sure everything's high and tight, does an oil change for me, does a fuel filter change for me, air filter change, looks it over, tells me what he thinks about the machine. If he thinks it's a good machine, I start running it. If he thinks it's a bad machine, I ask him, well, what does it need? And then we start putting parts into it, and I'll probably sell it. Now, I've had other machines. I had a Hobart Champion, which was a horrible machine, constant board issues. That went and seen John 3 times with board issues, so I would not suggest that model year of the Hobart because it just gave me nothing but trouble. I really wouldn't suggest the Raider. I believe that one's by Thermalarc. That old Raider with the stainless steel body that you see here, that was a fucking terrible machine as well. Nothing but problems, nothing but board problems. That thing has 3 boards in it. Why? Because the Germans made it, and they over-engineer the fuck out of everything. If you've ever owned a German car, you know anything with a motor in it that the Germans make is usually crap. So, you know, I would stay away from those machines. For me, a Ranger is a great machine, a Lincoln Ranger, the SAE 200 or SA 200. If you're experienced in working on those old 4-cylinder motors, those Continentals, that's not a bad machine. And then people, I see the guys with the Pipe Pros and all that shit. You don't need any of that fancy shit to start your own mobile welding and repair service. The Pipe Pros is more of a luxury item for those pipeline guys who just weld in circles all day, which is, you know, perfectly acceptable if you want to spend $25,000, $30,000 on a fucking machine that does the same goddamn thing as my SAE 350. Each their own. If you got money and you want to spend money like water and you like pissing into the wind, it's a really good option. But for me, it's all about value when I purchase a machine. And I think if I had to start over again and I had $5,000 in my pocket, this is the machine I would start over again with. It's not the best welding machine, but it's the most versatile for the price. You're not going to find a machine that readily hooks up to a spool gun, that is so adjustable that you can scratch, start, TIG off of, that you can run a suitcase off of, which you could do all that on other machines too, except for the spool gun. So I really, really like my Trailblazer. It's done really well for me over the years. It's made me fucking boatloads of money, and I don't think I'll ever get rid of it. Even if the motor blows up, I'll just replace the motor. There's even the option of that small engine drive welder that Harbor Freight sells. I talk about it in a short briefly. It's like 1,800 bucks. It's really not a bad option. I'm sure some of you guys have seen my review of the cheapest engine drive welder on the internet. It was $1,000 when I made that video. Apparently it's up to $1,300. I guess they made some sales from my video. But if you have to start with something and you only have sub $2,000, there's another two options for you. But like I said, I wouldn't really jump into this business unless you got $5 grand floating around. I mean, you really should try to have excess money whenever you start any sort of business. You know, I mean, you could start a lawn care business and you want to make sure you have excess money. I mean, even that's an expensive endeavor too. Of course, all the other tools that go along with it, it'll probably cost you $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 with a truck, welder, and most tools, not all of them, of course, to get started in this business. But anyway, I'm Meltin Metal Anthony. If you like what you saw here today, like, subscribe, share. If you didn't like it, well, you know what to do. Go fuck yourself.